America's middle class, once the backbone of economic stability, is shrinking. Over the past 4 decades, median household income has stagnated, while living costs continue to rise steadily. Data shows that middle-income families now spend a larger portion of their earnings on housing, healthcare, and education, leaving less disposable income for savings or investment. According to Pew Research, only 50% of Americans now fall into the middle-class bracket, compared to over 60% in the 1970s, highlighting a steady decline. Income inequality has surged, with the top 10% capturing nearly 70% of the nation's wealth growth since 1980, leaving middle-class households increasingly pressured. Housing costs are a critical factor. Rent and mortgage payments have grown faster than wages, forcing many middle-class families to take on additional debt. Healthcare expenses are another burden. Annual premiums and out-of-pocket costs have risen sharply, consuming a larger share of household budgets than ever before. Education costs, particularly college tuition, are skyrocketing. Many middle-class families struggle to save for their children's future while managing day-to-day expenses. Job security is also eroding. Manufacturing jobs, historically a pillar of middle-class employment, have declined due to automation and offshoring. Service sector jobs, while growing, often offer lower wages and fewer benefits, failing to replace the stable incomes that defined the middle class. The gig economy offers flexibility, but it often lacks stability and benefits, leaving middle-class workers more vulnerable to economic shocks. Inflation disproportionately affects middle-class families. Essentials like food, energy, and transportation consume a higher percentage of income than for wealthier households. Middle-class Americans are increasingly forced to rely on credit, contributing to rising consumer debt levels, which reached record highs in recent years. Economic mobility has slowed. Children of middle-class families now face a harder climb to maintain or improve their parents' standard of living. Tax policy trends favor the wealthy, reducing resources for social programs that historically supported middle-class stability. Home ownership, a traditional marker of middle-class status, is becoming less attainable, particularly for younger generations burdened with student loans. Healthcare access remains a challenge. Unexpected medical emergencies can wipe out savings, pushing families into financial instability. Corporate consolidation has reduced competition in many industries, driving up prices for essential goods and services, squeezing the middle class further. Automation and AI threaten to displace millions of middle-income jobs, particularly in logistics, retail, and clerical sectors. While tech jobs offer high pay, they require specialized skills, leaving traditional middle-class workers behind in the labor market. Financial literacy gaps exacerbate the problem. Many families lack the tools or knowledge to build wealth, invest, or plan for retirement effectively. The erosion of pension programs further weakens middle-class security. Defined benefit plans have largely disappeared, replaced by uncertain 401ks. Middle-class Americans are increasingly dependent on government aid for essentials, reflecting the growing economic pressures they face daily. Geographic disparities amplify the crisis. Cities with high living costs push middle-class residents to suburbs or rural areas, disrupting communities. Rising student debt prevents young adults from achieving traditional middle-class milestones like homeownership, marriage, and family formation. The retirement gap widens. Many middle-class Americans cannot save enough for retirement, facing potential dependency on Social Security alone. Economic shocks, such as the 2008 financial crisis or the COVID-19 pandemic, disproportionately harm middle-class families who have fewer buffers. Small business ownership, a traditional path to middle-class stability, faces increasing challenges from competition and regulatory pressures.
Transportation costs, including car loans, fuel, and insurance, consume an increasing portion of middle-class budgets, limiting disposable income. Middle-class families face difficult trade-offs between career, family, and financial stability, often sacrificing quality of life to survive.
Access to quality education is unequal. Middle-class children may attend underfunded schools, impacting future earning potential and perpetuating inequality. Middle-class neighborhoods are shrinking as wealthier individuals concentrate in affluent areas, driving up local costs and reducing affordable housing options. Healthcare disparities persist. Middle-class families often have insurance but still face high deductibles, limiting access to necessary care. Inflation-adjusted wages for middle-income workers have barely grown over decades, while CEO compensation has soared, widening the wealth gap. The erosion of union power has weakened middle-class negotiating power, reducing wages, benefits, and job protections over time. Middle-class Americans are increasingly forced to work multiple jobs to maintain living standards, increasing stress and reducing quality of life. Credit dependence introduces financial risk. Interest payments on loans and credit cards further reduce funds available for investment or savings. The disappearance of secure jobs leads to uncertainty about the future, discouraging long-term planning and reducing confidence in upward mobility. Food insecurity among middle-class families is rising, reflecting broader economic pressures and the rising cost of basic necessities. Healthcare disparities result in postponed or avoided medical treatment, which can exacerbate illness and increase long-term costs. Childcare expenses have become a major burden. Middle-class families often pay thousands monthly, significantly reducing disposable income. Rural middle-class communities face unique challenges, including fewer job opportunities, declining industries, and reduced access to services. Racial and gender wage gaps intersect with class issues, further impacting economic stability and middle-class growth for marginalized groups. The tech-driven economy rewards specialized skills, leaving traditional middle-class jobs vulnerable to wage stagnation or elimination. Middle-class debt levels, including mortgages, student loans, and credit cards, continue to rise, increasing financial vulnerability. Retirement insecurity is prevalent. Many middle-class workers lack adequate savings, leaving them exposed to economic downturns in old age. Property taxes and insurance costs continue rising, disproportionately affecting middle-class homeowners and reducing disposable income. Access to affordable mental health care is limited, adding another layer of stress and financial strain for middle-class families. Middle-class Americans increasingly delay major life decisions, including buying homes, marriage, and children due to financial pressures. Inflation-adjusted income for middle-class workers is lower than it was 40 years ago, showing a clear erosion of purchasing power. Many middle-class families live paycheck to paycheck, unable to save for emergencies or invest in long-term financial growth. Globalization has shifted well-paying manufacturing jobs overseas, replacing them with lower-wage service sector positions domestically. Middle-class wage growth lags behind inflation, meaning families can afford less despite working the same hours or more. Healthcare spending consumes a growing portion of middle-class income, forcing trade-offs between medical care and other essentials. Housing affordability is crisis level. Renters and buyers alike struggle to secure adequate housing within reasonable budget constraints. Middle-class households often lack diversified investments, increasing exposure to market volatility and economic shocks. Student loan debt limits generational wealth accumulation, preventing younger Americans from investing in property or retirement accounts. Middle-class economic pressure leads to delayed retirement, longer working hours, and reduced leisure or family time. Job automation threatens to replace routine middle-class roles, requiring reskilling or transition to less secure employment sectors. The middle class contributes significantly to tax revenue, yet often receives fewer benefits compared to lower income support or corporate tax breaks.
Economic disparity fuels political tension as middle-class frustrations rise with perceived unfairness and lack of opportunity. Access to technology and digital skills increasingly defines economic opportunity, disadvantaging middle-class workers without adequate resources. Middle-class entrepreneurship is challenged by high startup costs, competition, and regulatory hurdles, limiting economic mobility. Healthcare crises can devastate middle-class families. One major illness can wipe out years of savings despite insurance coverage.
Inflation and stagnant wages create a persistent squeeze, forcing middle-class families to cut discretionary spending to survive. Middle-class households have fewer buffers against economic shocks than wealthy families, leaving them exposed during recessions or crises. Retirement insecurity is rising. Many cannot maintain their lifestyle in old age without continuing to work beyond traditional retirement age. Middle-class families face reduced job benefits, such as healthcare, paid leave, and retirement contributions, weakening financial security. Home ownership, once a pillar of middle-class stability, is now less accessible, especially in urban areas with rising property prices. Middle-class wage stagnation contrasts sharply with rising executive compensation, highlighting the growing wealth gap in America. Economic pressures force middle-class families to delay or forgo essential investments in health, education, and retirement savings. Middle-class workers increasingly face contract or freelance employment, lacking traditional job protections and benefits. The erosion of unions and collective bargaining has weakened wage growth and job security, further straining middle-class families. Middle-class parents often face difficult choices between career advancement and family responsibilities due to rising costs and limited support. Transportation costs, including commuting, fuel, and maintenance, consume more of middle-class budgets, reducing discretionary income. Childcare affordability limits workforce participation, especially for women, reinforcing income stagnation and career challenges. Healthcare premiums, deductibles, and prescription costs continue rising, disproportionately impacting middle-class households with limited savings. Middle-class Americans face rising debt levels, balancing mortgages, student loans, and credit card payments, increasing financial stress. Retirement savings remain insufficient for many, risking dependence on government programs and limiting future financial freedom. Middle-class families experience pressure from rising costs of basic necessities, leaving little room for discretionary spending or investment. Income inequality continues to grow. The top 1% accumulate wealth rapidly, while middle-class wages lag, creating widening economic disparities. Geographic disparities exacerbate the crisis. Living costs in metropolitan areas outpace income growth, pushing middle-class families to relocate. Global economic shifts, automation, and outsourcing continue to reduce stable, well-paying jobs that historically supported the middle class. Middle-class households often rely on credit to cover gaps, leading to higher debt levels and increased financial vulnerability. Economic pressures delay traditional milestones such as marriage, homeownership, and family planning, affecting societal norms and growth. Middle-class families face trade-offs between career advancement, education costs, and personal well-being, creating long-term economic challenges. Financial insecurity contributes to stress, mental health issues, and reduced quality of life, disproportionately affecting middle-class households. Middle-class Americans are increasingly dependent on government aid during crises, highlighting systemic vulnerabilities in economic stability.
Policy interventions, including affordable housing and healthcare reform, are critical to prevent further erosion of the middle class.
Middle-class families are key consumers. Their shrinking purchasing power has broader implications for economic growth and business stability. The disappearance of secure, well-paying jobs threatens social cohesion and long-term economic sustainability in America. Middle-class households face barriers to wealth accumulation, including stagnant wages, rising costs, and limited investment opportunities. Economic mobility is declining. Children of middle-class families increasingly struggle to maintain or exceed their parents' standard of living. Middle-class communities are pressured by urban development, rising costs, and reduced affordability, leading to social and economic displacement.
Financial stress affects health outcomes, family stability, and educational opportunities for middle-class children, perpetuating inequality. Policy reforms targeting education, healthcare, and housing could stabilize the middle class and restore economic opportunity. Middle-class erosion has far-reaching consequences, from political polarization to reduced consumer spending, impacting the overall economy. Without intervention, the disappearance of the middle class threatens the American dream, undermining decades of economic progress and social stability. Preserving the middle class requires comprehensive policy, wage growth, and equitable access to education, healthcare, and housing to ensure a prosperous future.